Diplomatic rank is the system of professional and social rank used in the world of diplomacy and international relations. Over time it has been formalized on an international basis. Traditional European diplomacy ranks equals. Until the early 19th century, each European nation had its own system of diplomatic rank. The relative ranks of diplomats from different nations had been a source of considerable dispute, made more so by the insistence of major nations to have their diplomats ranked higher than those of minor nations, to be reflected in such things as table seatings. In an attempt to resolve the problem, the Congress of Vienna of 1815 formally established an international system of diplomatic ranks. The four ranks within the system are, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. An ambassador is a head of mission, formally representing the head of state, with plenipotentiary powers. An ambassador representing the Holy See is known as the Papal Nuncio. Diplomatic appointments in the Anglican Communion are usually episcopal commissary, and envoy. Ambassadors are entitled to use the title His Her Excellency. Among Commonwealth countries, which share a common head of state, the equivalent title that is normally used is High Commissioner, who represents the government rather than the head of state. Envoy Extraordinary and Minister Plenipotentiary. An envoy is a head of mission, not considered a representative of the head of state, but nonetheless with plenipotentiary powers. Envoys are also entitled to use the title His Her Excellency. Minister Resident or Resident Minister. Introduced by the Congress of Aix-la-Chapelle, this is the lowest rank of full head of mission, above only Chargé Copyright d'Affaires. Note that both the envoy and the minister resident are diplomatic ministers, which are not the same thing as government ministers or religious ministers. Chargé Copyright d'Affaires, p. As the title suggests, a Chargé Copyright d'Affaires is in charge of the affairs of a diplomatic mission in the usually temporary absence of a more senior diplomat. A Chargé Copyright d'Affaires ad interim or simply AI is generally serving as chief of mission during the temporary absence of the head of mission, while the Chargé Copyright d'Affaires EP or NPID maintains the same functions and duties as an ambassador. As it turned out, this system of diplomatic rank created its own set of problems regarding the nation's precedence. The appropriate diplomatic ranks used would be determined by the precedence among the nations. Thus the exchanges of ambassadors would be reserved among major nations, or close allies and related monarchies. In contrast, a major nation would probably send just an envoy to a minor nation, who in return would send an envoy to the major nation. As a result, the United States did not use the rank of ambassador until its emergence as a major world power at the end of the 19th century. Indeed, until the mid-20th century, the majority of diplomats in the world were of the rank of envoy. After World War II, it was no longer considered acceptable to treat some nations as inferior to others given the United Nations doctrine of equality of sovereign states. Therefore most legations were upgraded to embassies, and the use of the rank of minister for diplomatic missions' highest-ranking officials gradually ceased. The last U.S. legations, in Sofia, Bulgaria, and Budapest, Hungary, were upgraded to embassies on November 28, 1966. Where those ranks still exist, their incumbents usually act as embassy section chiefs or deputy chief of mission. Traditions in accordance with the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, diplomats are not regarded as having officially taken up their duties until they receive diplomatic accreditation. This is done by means of a letter of credence which is presented by a new head of mission to the head of state of the receiving nation. Embassy, a diplomatic mission headed by an ambassador; High Commission, a diplomatic mission headed by a High Commissioner; Legation, a diplomatic mission headed by an envoy or a minister resident. Note that the building in which the diplomatic mission is housed is a chancery, and as such it is technically incorrect to refer to the building as an embassy. All the diplomats that are assigned to a nation are known collectively as the diplomatic corps. One of these diplomats is often recognized as the primus inter pares. This diplomat is referred to as the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. Traditionally, this is the most senior diplomat in the country, as determined by date of arrival in the country or presentation of credentials, although in some Catholic nations it is ex officio the Papal Nuncio. Modern diplomats. Bilateral diplomacy . In modern diplomatic practice there are a number of diplomatic ranks below ambassador. Since most missions are now headed by an ambassador, these ranks now rarely indicate a mission's relative importance, but rather reflect the diplomat's individual seniority within their own nation's diplomatic career path and in the diplomatic corps in the host nation. Ambassador. Ambassador at large, minister, minister counselor, counselor, first secretary, second secretary, third secretary, attaché copyright, assistant attaché copyright. Chargé copyright d'affaires, chargé copyright d'affaires, P, and chargé copyright d'affaires, ad interim are separate titles used when an ambassador is not present, has not been appointed, or is otherwise not able to discharge duties in a specific location. Generally, the ad interim chargé copyright is another staff member accredited in the host country for the head of mission's temporary absences. In such cases, the diplomatic mission advises the local government by means of a diplomatic note that a specific individual has been appointed chargé copyright for a specific or indefinite period of time. In contrast to an ambassador, the specific agreement of the host government is not required. Attaché copyright. The term attaché copyright, P2, is used for any diplomatic agent who does not fit in the standard diplomatic ranks, often because they are not members of the sending country's diplomatic service or foreign ministry, and were therefore only attached to the diplomatic mission. The most frequent use is for military attaché copyright S, but the diplomatic title may be used for any specific individual or position as required. Since administrative and technical staff benefit from only limited diplomatic immunity, some countries may routinely appoint support staff as attaché copyright S. Attaché copyright does not, therefore, denote any rank or position. Note that many traditional functionary roles, such as press attaché copyright or cultural attaché copyright, are not formal titles in diplomatic practice, although they may be used as a matter of custom. Multilateral diplomacy . Furthermore, outside this traditional pattern of bilateral diplomacy, as a rule on a permanent residency basis, certain ranks and positions were created specifically for multilateral diplomacy. An ambassador at large is equivalent of an ambassador and assigns specific tasks or region in which he is assigned various assignments aimed at multi-track diplomacy. A permanent representative is the equivalent of an ambassador, normally of that rank, but accredited to an international body, not to a head of state. A resident representative is also a member of the diplomatic corps, but is below the rank of ambassador. A representative is accredited by an international organization to a country's government. The resident representative typically heads the country office of that international organization within that country. A special ambassador is a government specialist diplomat in a particular field, not posted in residence, but often traveling around the globe. The U.S. Trade Representative is an ambassador of cabinet rank, in charge of U.S. delegations in multilateral trade negotiations. The USTR's Special Agricultural Negotiator also typically holds an ambassadorial appointment. Special Envoys. Special envoys have been created ad hoc by individual countries, regional powers in the United Nations. A few examples are provided below. Belgium in 2005, former cabinet member, Pierre Chevalier served as special envoy of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe presidency to mediate in the Gazprom natural gas pipeline crisis involving Russia, Ukraine, and the European Union. India. During the 2006 democracy movement in Nepal, India sent on April 18 Karan Singh, who is related to royalty in both predominantly Hindu countries, as special envoy to neighbouring Nepal where increasingly violent opposition started its successful challenge of the king's autocratic rule. Another instance was during the 2009 Copenhagen Climate Change Summit. India appointed senior diplomat Shyam Saran as a special envoy to coordinate the negotiating position of the basic countries. United Kingdom appointed special envoys from time to time. European Union appointed various special representatives. For example, in 2005 as a response to events in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan the Council of the EU appointed Jan Kibis as its special representative for Central Asia. Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif appointed Ambassador Javed Malik as Pakistan's Special Envoy for Trade and Investment based in the GCC Gulf region with a diplomatic rank of an ambassador. United States appointed numerous special envoys including a special envoy for Northern Ireland with a diplomatic rank of ambassador to help with the Northern Ireland peace process. As of 2008, the position was occupied by Paula Dobryansky. Special envoys have been appointed for Sudan, Syria, Middle East peace, Eurasian energy, climate change, and human rights in North Korea. Other posts include Special Representative, Special Advisor, and Special Coordinator. The Secretary-General of the United Nations personally mandates special envoys for a particular field, including United Nations Special Envoy for HIV/AIDS in Africa, United Nations Special Envoy on Climate Change, United Nations Special Envoy for Kosovo, United Nations Special Envoy for Darfur, United Nations Special Envoy for Refugees. The Director General of UNESCO appoints special envoys who can use their talents and renown to further the organization unregistered trademark ideals and action. Envoys include Special Envoy for Basic and Higher Education, H. Sheikh Mozzar bin Nasser Al Mission of Qatar, Special Envoy for Haiti, the Right Honourable Michael Allegine, former Governor-General of Canada, Special Envoy for Water, H. Prince Talal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, Special Envoy on Literacy for Development, H. Princess Laurentian of the Netherlands. A sui generis case is the High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Usage worldwide. Most countries worldwide have some form of internal rank, roughly parallel to the diplomatic ranks, which are used in their foreign service or civil service in general. The correspondence is not exact, however, for various reasons, including the fact that according to diplomatic usage, all ambassadors are of equal rank, but clearly ambassadors of more senior rank are sent to more important postings. Some countries may make specific links or comparisons to military ranks. Equals in the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade equals, officers from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade are graded into 4 broad bands, with the senior executive service following above. Ambassadors, High Commissioners and Consuls General usually come from the senior executive service, although in smaller posts the head of mission may be a BB4 officer. Generally speaking, councillors are represented by BB4 officers. Consuls and first and second secretaries are BB3 officers and third secretaries and vice-consuls are BB2 officers. DFAT only posts a limited number of low-level BB1 staff abroad. In large missions an SES officer who is not the head of mission could be posted with the rank of minister. British Diplomatic Service Her Majesty's Diplomatic Service differentiates between officers in the senior management structure, and those in the delegated grades. SMS officers are classified into 3 pay bands, and will serve in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London as permanent Under-Secretary, Directors General, Directors, or Heads of Department. Overseas they will be ambassadors, or consuls general, deputy heads of mission or councillors for larger posts. In the delegated grades, officers are graded by number from 1 to 7. The grades are grouped into bands lettered or Euro D. Overseas, A2 grade officers hold the title of attaché, B3 Euro grade officers are third secretaries. C4S are second secretaries. And C5S and D6S are first secretaries. D7 officers are usually deputy heads of mission in medium-sized posts or heads of mission in small posts. In the British Civil Service grades rank from 7 up to 1, with grade 1 being permanent secretary. Grade 7 was formerly known as principal officer, grade 6 as senior principal officer. Equally pay band A is the most senior, with B, C, and D following. The 1 to 7 grading system in the UK is the reverse to that of the United States where higher numbers denote higher seniority. If head of mission and deputy head of mission is senior to first secretary followed by second and third secretary, then these ranks should logically follow the seniority of grades in the Home Civil Service. French Diplomatic Service There are 4 ranks in the French Diplomatic Service: Secrétaire Copyright des Affaires à Copyright Trangares or secretaries, Conseiller des Affaires à Copyright Trangares or councillors, Minister plenipotentiaire, the most common rank for heads of mission, but it also applies to some ministers' counselors in important embassies, Ambassadeur de France, an honorary dignity. Brazilian diplomatic service there are 6 ranks in the Brazilian Ministry of External Affairs: Terceiro Secretario, Segundo Secretario, Primeiro Secretario, Conselheiro, Ministro de Segunda Classe, Ministro de Primeira Classe. Embaixador is the honorary dignity conceded permanently when a minister of first class assumes a post overseas. It can also be a temporary assignment, when carried on by a lower-rank diplomat or Brazilian politician of high level. Spanish diplomatic corps after the merger of the consular and diplomatic corps, the current 8 grades of Spanish career diplomats are, Funcionario en Prácticas, title held during the 1-year training program at the diplomatic school. Secretario de Embaixada de Terceira Classe or Secretary. Secretario de Embaixada de Segunda Classe. Secretario de Embaixada de Primeira Classe. Conselheiro or Consular, lowest grade to be appointed Consul General. Ministro Plenipotentiario de Terceira Classe, commonly known as Minister, lowest grade to be appointed Ambassador. Ministro Plenipotentiario de Segunda Classe. Ministro Plenipotentiario de Primeira Classe. Embaixada de Espanha plus or minus a, not all Spanish ambassadors hold this grade, which is limited by law to 3% of the total corps. United States Foreign Service in the United States Foreign Service, the personnel system under which most U.S. diplomatic personnel are assigned, a system of personal ranks is applied which roughly corresponds to these diplomatic ranks. Personal ranks are differentiated as Senior Foreign Service, or Member of the Foreign Service. The SFS ranks, in descending order, are Career Ambassador, awarded to career diplomats with extensive and distinguished service. Career Minister, the highest regular senior rank. Minister Counselor and Counselor. In U.S. terms, these correspond to 4, 3, 2 and 1-star general in the military, respectively. Officers at these ranks may serve as ambassadors and occupy the most senior positions in diplomatic missions. Members of the Foreign Service consist of 5 groups, including Foreign Service officers and Foreign Service specialists. Like officers in the U.S. military, Foreign Service officers are members of the Foreign Service who are commissioned by the President. As with warrant officers in the U.S. military, Foreign Service specialists are technical leaders and experts, commissioned not by the President but by the Secretary of State. Ranks descend from the highest, FSA 1, equivalent to a full colonel in the military, to FSA 9, the lowest rank in the U.S. Foreign Service personnel system. Personal rank is distinct from and should not be confused with the diplomatic or consular rank assigned at the time of appointment to a particular diplomatic or consular mission. In a large mission, several senior diplomats may serve under the ambassador as minister counselors, and first secretaries. In a small mission, a diplomat may serve as the lone counselor of embassy. Consular counterpart, formally the consular career forms a separate hierarchy. Many countries do not internally have a separate consular path or stream, and the meaning of consular responsibilities and functions will differ from country to country. Other titles, including Vice-Consul General, have existed in the past. Consular titles may be used concurrently with diplomatic titles if the individual is assigned to an embassy. Diplomatic immunity is more limited for consular officials without other diplomatic accreditation, and broadly limited to immunity with respect to their official duties. At a separate consular post, the official will have only a consular title. Officials at consular posts may therefore have consular titles, but not be involved in traditional consular activities, and actually be responsible for trade, cultural, or other matters. Consular officers, being nominally more distant from the politically sensitive aspects of diplomacy, can more easily render a wide range of services to private citizens, enterprises, etc. They may be more numerous since diplomatic missions are posted only in a nation's capital, while consular officials are stationed in various other cities as well. However, It is not uncommon for individuals to be transferred from one hierarchy to the other, and for consular officials to serve in a capital carrying out strictly consular duties within the consular section of a diplomatic post, for example, within an embassy. Some countries routinely provide their embassy officials with consular commissions, including those without formal consular responsibilities, since a consular commission allows the individual to legalize documents, sign certain documents, and undertake certain other necessary functions. Depending on the practice of the individual country, consular services may be limited to services provided for citizens or residents of the sending country, or extended to include, for example, visa services for nationals of the host country. Sending nations may also designate incumbents of certain positions as holding consulary authority by virtue of their office, while lacking individual accreditation, immunity and inviolability. For example, 10 U.S.C. A millisecond Section 936 and 1044 identify various U.S. military officers who hold general authority as a notary and consul of the United States for, respectively, purposes of military administration and those entitled to military legal assistance. A nation may also declare that its senior merchant sea captain in a given foreign port or its merchant sea captains general has consulary authority for merchant seamen. See also: agricultural attaché copyright, apocrysery, commissioner, consul, diplomacy, internuncio, nuncio, goodwill ambassador, minister Secretary of State for Finland, legate. Notes and references, p. The term charge copyright d'affaires is pronounced charge d'affaires. p2. The term attaché copyright is pronounced attaché. Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of 1961.